Welcome to today's episode of Forgotten Journeys, where we embark on the most extraordinary migration story ever told, a tale that spans hundreds of thousands of years and reveals how early humans conquered one of Earth's most diverse and challenging landscapes, the Indian subcontinent. Picture this. You're standing on the coastline of what is now Gujarat, 75,000 years ago. The ocean stretches endlessly before you, but behind you lies a vast, unknown continent. Massive rivers cut through dense forests, towering mountains pierce the sky, and somewhere in this immense landscape, your ancestors are about to write one of humanity's most remarkable survival stories. This isn't just another migration tale. This is the story of how early humans didn't just survive in the Indian subcontinent. They thrived, innovated, and created some of the world's first sophisticated technologies. They survived catastrophic volcanic eruptions that wiped out life across continents, developed tools that wouldn't be reinvented for millennia, and established civilizations that would influence the entire world. For decades, scientists believed that the Indian subcontinent was a late addition to the human story, a place our ancestors reached only after conquering easier territories. They were spectacularly wrong. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that India wasn't just an afterthought in human migration. It was one of the earliest and most important chapters in our species' survival story. The evidence is staggering. Stone tools buried beneath volcanic ash that fell 74,000 years ago. Fossil remains of early humans who walked these lands 500,000 years ago. Archaeological sites that reveal sophisticated technologies appearing in India before they existed anywhere else outside Africa. These discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of human migration and forced us to rewrite the story of how our species spread across the planet. How did they do it? How did early humans cross treacherous waters? Chapter 1. The First Crossing. The story begins with one of the most audacious journeys in human history. Imagine small groups of early modern humans, perhaps no more than a few hundred individuals, standing on the shores of Africa around 75,000 years ago. Behind them lay the only continent our species had ever known. Ahead lay an infinite ocean and the unknown promise of new lands. The decision they made would change the course of human history forever. The first migrants came with the coastal migration southern dispersal 65,000 years ago, whereafter complex migrations within South and Southeast Asia took place. But recent archaeological evidence suggests that humans may have reached the Indian subcontinent even earlier than previously thought. These weren't random wanderers stumbling upon new territory. Scholars estimate that the first successful expansion of the Homo sapiens range beyond Africa and across the Arabian Peninsula occurred from as early as 80,000 years ago to as late as 40,000 years ago, although there may have been prior unsuccessful emigrations. The journey to India required sophisticated planning, advanced boat-building technology, and intimate knowledge of ocean currents and weather patterns. The route they took has become known as the Southern Dispersal or Coastal Migration Route. There is some evidence that modern humans left Africa at least 125,000 years ago using two different routes: through the Nile Valley, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Levant, Kafse Cave, 120,000 to 100,000 years ago, and a second route through the present-day Bab el-Mandeb Strait on the Red Sea, at that time, with a much lower sea level and narrower extension, crossing to the Arabian Peninsula and settling in places like the present-day United Arab Emirates 125,000 years ago, and Oman 106,000 years ago, and possibly reaching the Indian subcontinent, Jualapuram, 75,000 years ago. The crossing from the Arabian Peninsula to the Indian subcontinent wasn't just a matter of distance. It required technological innovations that pushed the boundaries of what early humans had previously achieved. Sea levels were lower during the Ice Age, but there were still significant water barriers that could only be crossed by boat. This means that the first Indians were among humanity's earliest mariners, developing watercraft technology that enabled them to navigate open ocean waters. What motivated this incredible journey? Climate change played a crucial role. As ice ages locked up vast amounts of water in glaciers, previously habitable regions became uninhabitable, while new coastal areas emerged. Eventually, various bands entered India between 75,000 years ago and 35,000 years ago. But it wasn't just environmental pressure driving them. It was also human curiosity and the eternal drive to explore beyond the horizon. The landing sites along the Indian coast would have presented both opportunities and challenges. The Arabian Sea coastline offered abundant marine resources, fresh water from rivers flowing into the ocean, and relatively flat terrain suitable for temporary settlements. But moving inland required adapting to entirely new environments: tropical forests, vast river systems, and landscapes unlike anything their ancestors had ever encountered. Archaeological evidence from Jewalapuram in southern India provides compelling evidence of this early arrival. Jewalapuram, meaning City of Fire in Telugu, is an archaeological site in the Nandyal district of Andhra Pradesh, southern India, which shows hominid habitation before and after the Toba event 73 K, according to the Toba Catastrophe theory. The discovery of stone tools both below and above the volcanic ash from the Toba supereruption provides direct evidence that humans were already well established in southern India 74,000 years ago. The sophistication of these early arrivals is remarkable. The open-air site, designated Jewalapuram Locality 22 and located in the Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh, preserves more than 1,600 stone artifacts assigned to the Indian Middle Paleolithic. These weren't simple tools made by desperate refugees. They represent sophisticated technology that demonstrates these early Indians had well-developed manufacturing skills. The coastal migration route had several advantages that made it preferable to inland routes. Coastal environments provided consistent access to both marine and terrestrial resources. Rivers flowing into the ocean created natural highways for inland exploration. The relatively stable climate along tropical coastlines offered more predictable living conditions than the harsh inland deserts and mountain ranges. But perhaps most importantly, the coastal route allowed for continued contact between different groups of early humans. Unlike inland migrations that could isolate populations for thousands of years, coastal settlements could maintain trade and cultural connections across vast distances. Chapter 2. Into the Unknown. Once early humans established their initial footholds along the Indian coastline, they faced a challenge unlike anything their species had previously encountered: penetrating and adapting to one of Earth's most geographically diverse regions. The Indian subcontinent wasn't just big, it contained virtually every type of environment that existed on the planet, from tropical rainforests to arid deserts, from mighty river systems to towering mountain ranges. The sheer scale of the landscape was staggering. The subcontinent spans over 4 million square kilometers, roughly equivalent to the size of Europe. But unlike Europe's relatively uniform temperate climate, India contained tropical zones in the south, temperate regions in the north, desert areas in the west, and some of the world's wettest regions in the northeast. Each environment required completely different survival strategies. The Western Ghats presented the first major challenge for groups moving inland from the western coast. This mountain range, running parallel to the Arabian Sea, created a natural barrier that forced early humans to develop specialized skills for navigating steep terrain, dense forests, and monsoon-soaked landscapes. The biodiversity here was overwhelming thousands of plant and animal species that existed nowhere else on Earth, each requiring careful study to determine which were useful and which were dangerous. Moving eastward from the coast, early humans encountered the Deccan Plateau, a vast elevated region that covers much of central and southern India. This landscape was fundamentally different from the coastal plains, drier, more open, but with its own unique challenges. The volcanic soil was incredibly fertile, but the climate was more variable, with distinct wet and dry seasons that required different survival strategies throughout the year. The river systems of India became natural highways for early human expansion, but they also presented unique challenges. Anatomically, modern humans first arrived on the Indian subcontinent between 73,000 and 55,000 years ago. The Ganges, Indus, Brahmaputra, Narmada, and dozens of other major rivers created vast floodplains that were incredibly fertile but also unpredictably dangerous. Seasonal flooding could submerge entire regions under meters of water, while drought periods could turn the same areas into arid wastelands. The Narmada Valley, in particular, became a crucial corridor for early human movement. Sankyan shared during an interview that only the central Narmada Valley has so far yielded human fossils from the Pleistocene period in South Asia. The valley, he says, was a key stop along the migration route from Africa to Southeast Asia for Homo erectus. This valley served as a natural highway connecting western and eastern India, allowing early humans to move between different regions while maintaining access to water and resources. The technological adaptations required for success in these diverse environments were extraordinary. Early Indians had to develop different tool sets for different environments: fishing equipment for river and coastal areas, hunting weapons adapted to forest animals, and digging tools for extracting roots and tubers from different soil types. The stone tool assemblages found at sites across India show remarkable diversity, indicating that early humans quickly learned to adapt their technology to local conditions. Climate variations across the subcontinent meant that early humans had to master fundamentally different survival strategies, sometimes within just a few hundred kilometers. In the tropical south, the challenge was dealing with intense heat, humidity, and dense vegetation. In the northern regions, closer to the Himalayas, early humans had to adapt to colder temperatures, especially at higher elevations. The monsoon climate that dominates much of India created additional complexity. Unlike other regions where seasonal changes are gradual and predictable, the monsoon brings dramatic shifts between wet and dry seasons. Early humans had to learn to store resources during abundant periods to survive through leaner times, develop portable technologies that could function in both wet and dry conditions, and create social systems that could maintain group cohesion during the months-long monsoon seasons when travel was nearly impossible. The diversity of animal life across India required early humans to develop hunting strategies for an incredible range of species. In the forests, they encountered elephants, tigers, leopards, and numerous species of deer and antelope. In the rivers, there were crocodiles, massive fish, and other aquatic life. Each species required different hunting techniques, different processing methods, and different understanding of behavior patterns. Plant resources were equally diverse and challenging to master. India contains thousands of edible plant species, but many are only available during specific seasons or require special processing to be safe for consumption. Early humans had to develop encyclopedic knowledge of plant resources, learning which species were available when, how to process toxic plants to make them edible, and how to store plant foods for use during scarce periods. The geological diversity of India also created unique opportunities and challenges. Different regions contained different types of stone suitable for toolmaking, various minerals that could be used for paints and other purposes, and different soil types that... Chapter 3. Survivors of Catastrophe. 74,000 years ago, early humans living in the Indian subcontinent faced the ultimate test of survival. On the island of Sumatra, over 3,000 kilometers away, a supervolcano exploded with a force that dwarfed any natural disaster in recorded human history. The Toga supereruption was one of the largest volcanic events in the past 2 million years, and it should have wiped out all human life in southern Asia. Instead, it revealed the extraordinary resilience and adaptability of early Indian populations. The Toba supervolcanic eruption occurred at the site of present-day Lake Toba in Sumatra, Indonesia, about 75,000 years ago. It is one of the Earth's largest known eruptions. This cataclysmic volcanic event did affect existing civilizations during that period. Scientists researching on Toba supereruption believe the event caused a global volcanic winter of 6 to 10 years. The scale of this catastrophe is almost impossible to comprehend. 3,000 cubic kilometers of rock, mud, and ash material were thrown into the air during the explosion or series of explosions, covering Aryavrat Bharata with 6 to 8 meters of ash and mud, destroying all vegetation, animals, plants, and known civilization. It also destroyed Europe, Africa, China, and almost all the civilizations that existed during that time. Drifts in Pakistan and India reached as high as 6 meters. To put this in perspective, the Toba eruption was approximately 5,000 times more powerful than the Mount St. Helens eruption of 1980. It ejected so much material into the atmosphere that it blocked sunlight for years, creating a volcanic winter that dropped global temperatures by several degrees. The ash clouds circled the Earth multiple times, and volcanic ash fell as far away as East Africa and the Arctic. Yet incredibly, early humans in India not only survived this catastrophe, they maintained their cultural traditions and continued to develop technologically. The evidence comes from the archaeological site of Jewalapuram in Andhra Pradesh, where researchers have found clear evidence of human occupation both before and after the Toba eruption. At Jewalapuram Locality 9, 5 stratigraphic units provide a record of technological change through time. The hominin taxon responsible for creating the site is not known, but the stone tool evidence is most consistent with contemporaneous Homo sapiens technologies in Africa and to the east of South Asia. What makes this survival even more remarkable is that it wasn't just bare survival, it was continuity of sophisticated culture. Broad continuity of Middle Paleolithic technology across the YTT event suggests that hominins persisted regionally across this major eruptive event. The stone tools found below the Toba ash layer are remarkably similar to those found above it, indicating that human populations maintained their technological traditions through the disaster. The survival strategies that enabled early Indians to endure the Toba catastrophe reveal extraordinary adaptive capabilities. First, they must have had sophisticated food storage and preservation techniques. The volcanic winter would have killed most plants and animals across vast regions, creating famine conditions that lasted for years. Only populations with advanced planning and storage capabilities could have survived such extended hardship. Second, they must have developed advanced shelter technologies. The ashfall from Toba buried the landscape under meters of volcanic debris, making normal hunting and gathering impossible. Early humans would have needed to create sealed shelters that could protect them from the toxic ash while providing long-term habitation space. The engineering required for such construction was far beyond what most people associate with primitive hunter-gatherers. Third, they must have had sophisticated social organization that enabled large-scale cooperation during crisis conditions. Individual families or small groups couldn't have survived the Toba winter alone. Success required community-level planning, resource sharing, and coordinated survival efforts that could be maintained for years under extreme stress. The genetic evidence also supports the story of survival and continuity. Moreover, by performing simulations, we show the emission parameters in India are consistent with deriving 0 to 3% of ancestry from an earlier migration that occurred around 74,000 years ago. This suggests that while the Toba eruption may have caused significant population reductions, it didn't cause complete extinction of early Indian populations. The environmental recovery after Toba would have created unique opportunities for the surviving populations. As the volcanic winter ended and plant life began to recover, early humans would have found themselves in landscapes transformed by the catastrophe. The volcanic ash, while initially devastating, created incredibly fertile soils that supported rapid plant regrowth. Surviving humans would have had access to renewed resources and an environment with greatly reduced competition from other species. This recovery period may have been crucial for technological and cultural development. With reduced population pressure and abundant resources becoming available as ecosystems recovered, surviving groups would have had time and energy to invest in innovation and cultural elaboration. The post-Toba period may have seen accelerated technological development as populations adapted to the transformed landscape. The psychological impact of surviving such a catastrophe would have been profound. Communities that endured the Toba winter would have developed extraordinary confidence in their ability to survive extreme challenges. This psychological resilience may have enabled more aggressive exploration and colonization of new territories as populations recovered and expanded. The Toba Survival Story, Chapter 4. The Toolmakers. The story of human technology in the Indian subcontinent is one of extraordinary innovation and sophisticated engineering that challenges our assumptions about primitive early humans. Far from being simple tool users, early Indians were pioneering inventors whose technological achievements would not be matched in other parts of the world for tens of thousands of years. The archaeological site of Adirampakkam in Tamil Nadu has revolutionized our understanding of early human technology in India. The discovery of over 7,000 artifacts bearing evidence of the Live technique at Adirampakkam was published in Nature in 2018 by a research team led by Shanti Papu, which challenges some long-held assumptions about the out-of-Africa migration theory. Live tools have been traditionally associated with Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. However, the Adirampakkam findings are dated to 385, making them not only the earliest examples of this technology outside of Africa, but archaeologically contemporaneous to the earliest known African lava point, dated to 400K in East Africa's Cap Thurin Formation. This discovery is staggering in its implications. The Laval-Wose technique is one of the most sophisticated stone tool manufacturing methods ever developed, requiring extraordinary skill, planning, and understanding of stone properties. To create Laval-Wose tools, craftsmen had to visualize the final product before beginning work, carefully prepare a stone core through a series of precise strikes, and then remove perfectly shaped flakes with predetermined characteristics. This wasn't simple chipping at stones. It was advanced engineering that required years of training to master. The fact that this technology appeared in India at virtually the same time as it appeared in Africa suggests either rapid technology transfer between continents or independent invention. Either possibility demonstrates remarkable sophistication among early Indian populations. If it was technology transfer, it implies advanced communication networks spanning thousands of kilometers. If it was independent invention, it shows that early Indians were capable of the same level of technological innovation as their African counterparts. But the Live-Wose technique was just the beginning of Indian technological innovation. The tools discovered at Adirampakkam are almost 385,000 years old. Over hundreds of thousands of years, early Indian toolmakers continued to refine and advance their technologies, developing specialized tools adapted to the unique environments and challenges of the subcontinent. The diversity of stone tools found across Indian archaeological sites reveals sophisticated understanding of material science. Early Indian toolmakers learned to work with dozens of different types of stone, each requiring different techniques and producing tools with different characteristics. Quartzite, chert, basalt, and other materials were carefully selected for specific purposes, indicating detailed knowledge of how different stones behaved under different conditions. Heat treatment of stone tools represents another technological breakthrough that appeared early in Indian prehistory. This technique involves carefully heating stones to specific temperatures to improve their flaking properties, making it easier to create sharp, durable tools. The process requires precise temperature control, timing, and understanding of how heat affects different stone types, knowledge that took generations to develop and perfect. The hafting techniques developed by early Indian toolmakers were equally sophisticated. Rather than using tools as simple handheld implements, they learned to attach stone points and blades to wooden handles, creating composite tools that were far more effective than either component alone. These hafted tools required advanced understanding of materials properties, engineering principles, and manufacturing techniques. Specialized tool types found in Indian archaeological sites demonstrate adaptation to specific environmental challenges. Fishing tools designed for different types of water bodies, hunting weapons adapted to different prey species, and plant processing implements optimized for various food sources show that early Indian toolmakers weren't just copying designs from elsewhere. They were innovating solutions to local challenges. The microlithic technology that became dominant in later periods represents perhaps the most sophisticated stone tool tradition ever developed. Jewelapuram is of particular importance in understanding the emergence of microlithic technology in South Asia and the role of environmental change on lithic technological change. At Jewelapuram Locality 9, 5 stratigraphic units provide a record of technological change through time. Microblade technology dominates lithic assemblages from stratum E to the top deposit. Microliths are tiny, precisely shaped stone tools that were designed to be mounted in combinations to create composite implements. A single weapon might contain dozens of individual microliths, each shaped for a specific function. Creating these tools required extraordinary precision and planning, as each individual piece had to fit perfectly with others to create a functional whole. The technological sequences preserved at sites like Jewelapuram reveal continuous innovation over tens of thousands of years. The oldest and longest enduring microlithic sequence in India, 35 years of modern human occupation and change at the Jewelapuram Locality 9 rock shelter. This long sequence shows how early Indian populations continuously refined their technologies, developing new techniques and improving existing ones in response to changing environmental conditions and evolving needs. Tool production wasn't just a matter of individual craftsmanship. It required sophisticated social organization. The most complex tools required specialized knowledge that took years to master, meaning that early Indian societies had to develop systems for training specialists, organizing production, and distributing finished tools to users. This level of economic organization indicates far more complex social structures than traditionally associated with hunter-gatherer societies. The raw material procurement networks that supplied early Indian toolmakers were extensive and sophisticated. High-quality stone suitable for toolmaking wasn't available everywhere, so early Indians developed trade networks that moved materials hundreds of kilometers from sources to users. These networks required complex social relationships, standardized exchange systems, and sophisticated knowledge of resource locations across vast territories. Quality control in early Indian tool production was remarkably sophisticated. Archaeological analysis reveals that toolmakers developed standards for tool performance and consistently achieved these standards across thousands of individual implements. This level of quality control required not just individual skill, but systematic approaches to training, production, and evaluation that ensured consistent results. The innovation rate in early Indian tool technology was extraordinarily high compared to other regions and time periods. New tool types appear regularly in the archaeological record, and existing designs show continuous refinement and improvement. This pattern of rapid innovation suggests that early Indian societies actively encouraged technological experimentation and rewarded successful innovations. Chapter 5. The Fossil Hunter's Holy Grail, December 5, 1982, stands as one of the most significant dates in the study of human evolution in Asia. On this day, along the banks of the Narmada River in Madhya Pradesh, a team of geologists led by Dr. Arun Sanakia made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of early human presence in the Indian subcontinent. They uncovered what would become known as the Narmada human, the oldest human fossil ever found in South Asia. This fossil, commonly known as Narmada man, was recovered from the Pleistocene alluvium. The fossil find of a skull consists of a completely preserved right half of the skull cap with part of the left parietal attached. The significance of this discovery cannot be overstated. 30 years on, it remains the only fossil of early humans found on the subcontinent, making it the sole direct evidence we have of what our ancient ancestors looked like in this region. The age of the Narmada human places it at a crucial point in human evolutionary history. Some scholars take the Narmada fossil as a representative of the late Homo erectus category. Arun Sanakia, discoverer and the then director of GSI's Paleontology division, puts the age of the fossil at 500,000 to 600,000 years. His judgment is based on vertebrate fossils seen in the vicinity of the finds. This dating makes the Narmada human contemporary with other important human fossils from Africa and Europe, demonstrating that human evolution was occurring simultaneously across multiple continents. The debate over the exact species identification of the Narmada human reflects the complex nature of human evolution during the Middle Pleistocene period. The fossil had been variously reclassified as archaic Homo sapiens, evolved Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and also dubiously as a distinct species, Homo narmadensis. This uncertainty isn't unusual for fossils from this time period, as human evolution during the Middle Pleistocene was characterized by transitional forms that combine features from different species. What makes the Narmada human particularly interesting is its unique combination of features. While the Calvaria shares some anatomical features with Asian Homo erectus specimens, it exhibits a broader suite of morphological and mensural characteristics, suggesting affinities with early Homo sapiens fossils from Asia, Europe, and Africa, as well as demonstrating that the Narmada Calvaria possesses some unique anatomical features. This mixture of traits suggests that human evolution in India may have followed a unique trajectory, producing populations with distinctive characteristics. The cranial capacity of the Narmada human is particularly significant. The cranial capacity of these early and middle Pleistocene specimens averages 1,000 cc, but estimates for the Narmada cranial vault fell between 1,155 and 1,421 cc, values within the range of anatomically archaic Homo sapiens. This larger brain size indicates advanced cognitive capabilities and suggests that the Narmada human was capable of sophisticated behaviors, including complex tool use, language, and social organization. The archaeological context surrounding the Narmada human provides additional insights into the capabilities of these early Indians. Its antiquity is based upon the direct association of the Calvaria with stone tools, mainly hand axes and cleavers, typical of the prehistoric Acheulean technological tradition that was dominant in Middle Pleistocene times in India. These tools represent sophisticated technology that required advanced planning and skill to manufacture. The discovery location is also significant. The valley, he says, was a key stop along the migration route from Africa to Southeast Asia for Homo erectus. Homo erectus was an archaic human ancestor that lived between about 1.9 million and 100,000 years ago and adapted to regions from Eastern Africa to China to Southeast Asia. The Narmada Valley's position made it a crucial corridor for early human movement across Asia. Recent discoveries have expanded our understanding of early human presence in the Narmada Valley. The first new discovery was of a right clavicle. Later, a partial left clavicle and ninth rib were discovered. And recently, a femur and humerus fragments were discovered at another site, Netankiri. These additional fossils are providing more complete pictures of early human anatomy and behavior in the region. The preservation conditions that allowed the Narmada human to survive for hundreds of thousands of years were exceptional. Archaeologist Osankian argues that the current understanding of human evolution in South Asia greatly owes to the central Narmada Valley, which stands unique for gifting us unambiguous Middle to late Pleistocene hominin fossils in association with numerous mammalian fauna and Paleolithic implements. The broader implications of the Narmada human discovery extend far beyond India. Tracing continuity of evolving humans with the aid of their scanty skeletal remains is an intricate puzzle. In the specific case of Indian subcontinent, the so far oldest human ancestor, the Narmada hominid has wider spatial distance both from the antecedents on one side and the descendants on the other side. This fossil helps bridge gaps in our understanding of human evolution across the Old World. The Narmada human also provides insights into the relationship between different early human populations. Sankian argued that the geographic position of the Narmada Valley, situated midway in the Old World, could have served as a corridor for early hominin migrations, possibly facilitating hybridization. This suggests that India may have been a meeting ground where different human populations encountered and interbred with each other. The search for additional human fossils. Chapter 6. Masters of Stone and Fire. The story of early human technology in India reaches its first great climax with the development and mastery of Acheulean tool technology, a revolutionary advancement that transformed early humans from opportunistic tool users into sophisticated engineers and craftsmen. The Acheulean tradition represents one of humanity's first standardized technological systems, and its appearance and development in India reveals remarkable capabilities among early human populations. Sankian connects the Narmada Valley with some of the more sophisticated Acheulean stone tool cultures that emerged with Homo erectus in Europe and Africa. Acheulean tools are characterized by multi-use hand axes used for roles ranging from woodcutting to butchering animals. The development of these tools marked a fundamental shift in human technology from simple choppers and scrapers to sophisticated multi-purpose implements that required advanced planning and skill to manufacture. The hand axe, the signature tool of the Acheulean tradition, represents one of humanity's most successful technological innovations. These tools were used continuously for over 1 million years across Africa, Europe, and Asia, making them the longest-lived technology in human history. In India, Acheulean hand axes show remarkable sophistication and regional variation that demonstrates the creativity and adaptability of early Indian toolmakers. Creating an Acheulean hand axe required extraordinary skill and planning. Unlike simple choppers that could be made with a few strikes, hand axes required the toolmaker to envision the final product before beginning work, carefully select appropriate raw materials, and execute a complex sequence of precise strikes to achieve the desired shape. The symmetry and consistency of Indian Acheulean hand axes revealed that their makers had developed standardized manufacturing procedures and quality control systems. The raw materials used for Acheulean tools in India demonstrate sophisticated understanding of stone properties and procurement networks. Toolmakers carefully selected specific types of stone based on their intended use, harder materials for cutting tools, more easily worked stones for detailed shaping, and materials with specific fracture properties for different tool types. The sources of these materials were often located hundreds of kilometers from where the finished tools were used, indicating extensive trade networks and resource management systems. The size and proportions of Indian Acheulean hand axes show remarkable consistency across vast distances and long time periods. This standardization suggests that toolmakers were following established design principles that were passed down through generations and shared across different populations. The maintenance of these standards across such broad geographical and temporal ranges indicates sophisticated cultural transmission systems and possibly the existence of specialist toolmakers who trained others in proper techniques. Regional variations in Indian Acheulean tools provide insights into how early humans adapted their technology to different environments and needs. Hand axes from coastal regions show different proportions and finishing techniques compared to those from inland areas, reflecting adaptation to different raw materials and possibly different functional requirements. These variations demonstrate that early Indian toolmakers weren't simply copying designs from elsewhere, but were actively innovating and adapting their technology to local conditions. The functional capabilities of Acheulean tools were extraordinary. These implements could serve as cutting tools for butchering large animals, digging implements for extracting roots and tubers, woodworking tools for shaping spears and other wooden implements, and even weapons for hunting or defense. The multifunctional nature of these tools made them incredibly valuable to early human populations and helps explain their long-term success. The manufacturing debris found at Acheulean sites in India reveals sophisticated understanding of stone tool production economics. Toolmakers developed techniques for maximizing the number of useful tools that could be produced from a given amount of raw material, minimizing waste and recycling failed tools into other useful implements. This efficiency suggests that early Indian populations had developed systematic approaches to resource management and production planning. Fire technology became increasingly sophisticated during the Acheulean period in India. While early humans had been using fire for hundreds of thousands of years, Acheulean populations developed more advanced fire management techniques, including controlled burning for landscape management, specialized hearth construction, and possibly the use of fire in tool manufacturing processes. The association between Acheulean tools and fire technology suggests that these two innovations reinforced each other in promoting human success. The social implications of Acheulean technology were profound. The complexity and standardization of these tools required sophisticated teaching and learning systems, indicating that early Indian populations had developed formal or semi-formal educational institutions. The time and skill required to master Acheulean technology may have led to the emergence of specialist toolmakers who dedicated significant portions of their time to tool production rather than other subsistence activities. The temporal depth of the Acheulean tradition in India is remarkable. Evidence suggests that these tools were being manufactured and used for hundreds of thousands of years, with continuous refinement and improvement throughout this period. This longevity demonstrates not only the effectiveness of the technology, but also the stability of the cultural systems that maintained and transmitted the necessary knowledge across countless generations. The distribution of Acheulean sites across India shows that these technologies enabled early humans to successfully occupy virtually every environment in the subcontinent. From the tropical forests of the south to the river valleys of the north, from coastal plains to highland plateaus, Acheulean toolmakers adapted their technology to succeed in environments that would have been challenging or impossible to occupy with simpler tools. The transition from Acheulean to later technologies marks another important milestone in Indian prehistory. Rather than being replaced suddenly, Acheulean traditions gradually evolved into more sophisticated technologies, with elements of the older tradition being incorporated into new tool types and manufacturing techniques. This continuity suggests that technological change in India was generally evolutionary rather than revolutionary, with innovations building upon existing. Chapter 7. Rivers of Life. The great rivers of India, the Ganges, Indus, Brahmaputra, Narmada, and dozens of others weren't just geographical features for early human populations. They were highways of migration, sources of life, and the foundations upon which some of humanity's earliest complex societies were built. Learning to master these waterways required innovations in technology, social organization, and environmental management that would influence human development for millennia. The river systems of the Indian subcontinent present both extraordinary opportunities and unique challenges for human populations. These waterways drain some of the world's largest mountain ranges, carry enormous volumes of water and sediment, and create vast floodplains that can support large populations but also pose significant risks. Early humans had to develop sophisticated strategies for living with and managing these dynamic environments. The Indus River system, flowing through what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, became the foundation for one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. But long before the famous Harappan cities emerged, early human populations were learning to exploit the resources of the Indus Basin. Archaeological evidence shows human occupation of the region extending back hundreds of thousands of years, with continuous technological and cultural development leading eventually to urban civilization. The seasonal nature of Indian rivers created unique challenges and opportunities for early human populations. During monsoon periods, rivers could flood vast areas, making normal hunting and gathering impossible, but also depositing fertile silt across enormous floodplains. During dry seasons, water levels dropped dramatically, exposing new lands for occupation, but also creating challenges for accessing water and riverine resources. Early humans developed sophisticated flood management strategies that allowed them to benefit from seasonal flooding while minimizing its dangers. Archaeological evidence suggests that populations learned to construct temporary settlements on elevated ground. During flood seasons, developed portable technologies that could be quickly moved when waters rose and create food. Storage systems that could sustain communities through periods when normal resource exploitation was impossible. The Ganges River system, stretching across northern India, provided early humans with access to some of the world's most fertile agricultural land. But exploiting this potential required learning to manage the river's unpredictable flooding cycles, dealing with the health challenges of living in hot, humid floodplains, and developing technologies for working in the dense alluvial soils that characterize much of the Ganges basin. Fishing technologies developed by early Indian populations were remarkably sophisticated, adapted to the specific conditions and species found in different river systems. Some rivers required nets designed for fast-flowing water, others needed traps adapted to seasonal fish runs, and still others demanded techniques for catching fish in shallow, muddy waters during dry seasons. The diversity of fishing technologies found across India demonstrates detailed understanding of aquatic ecology and innovative engineering. Navigation technologies enabled early humans to use rivers as beavers, as transportation networks connecting distant regions of the subcontinent. Boat-building techniques adapted to different river conditions, navigation methods that could cope with seasonal changes in water levels and flow patterns, and knowledge of safe routes through dangerous rapids and floodplains all contributed to the development of river-based trade and communication networks. The Narmada River, flowing east-west across central India, served as a crucial corridor for early human movement and cultural exchange. The Narmada fauna brings forth the evidence of endemic and immigrant species crucial for the study of linkages and evolution through the understanding of the dispersal of species within India, and in and out migration from other geographical regions in time and place. This river system facilitated movement between eastern and western India while providing rich resources for human populations. Water management technologies developed by early Indian river populations were far more sophisticated than simple exploitation of natural water sources. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans learned to construct artificial channels for irrigation, create reservoirs for water storage during dry periods, and even build primitive dams to control flooding and water flow. These technologies required advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering and sophisticated social organization to construct and maintain. The health challenges of living in river environments required early humans to develop advanced medical knowledge and sanitation practices. River-associated diseases, contaminated water sources, and the health impacts of seasonal flooding all pose significant threats that could only be managed through sophisticated understanding of disease prevention and treatment. Agricultural development along Indian rivers required learning to work with rather than against natural flooding cycles. Early farmers developed crops and farming techniques adapted to seasonal flooding, learned to exploit the fertility of flood-deposited soils, and created agricultural systems that could recover quickly from flood damage. These innovations laid the foundation for the intensive agriculture that would later support urban civilizations. The spiritual and cultural significance of rivers in early Indian societies reflects their central importance in daily life. Rivers became associated with life, fertility, and renewal concepts that were embedded in religious and cultural practices that persist to this day. The reverence for rivers in Indian culture isn't just spiritual. It reflects practical understanding of their crucial role in human survival and prosperity. Trade networks that developed along Indian rivers connected populations across vast distances and facilitated the exchange of goods, technologies, and ideas. River-based trade was often more efficient than overland transport, enabling the movement of heavy or bulky goods that would have been impossible to transport by foot. These trade networks contributed to cultural exchange and technological diffusion across the subcontinent. The social organization required for successful river management was remarkably complex. Coordinating flood response, maintaining irrigation systems, managing fishing rights, and organizing river-based trade all required sophisticated institutional arrangements and leadership structures. These social innovations laid the groundwork for the more complex political organizations that would emerge with urban civilization. Climate change impacts on river systems required Chapter 8, The Great Convergence. The Indian subcontinent's position at the crossroads of Africa, Europe, and Asia made it inevitable that multiple waves of human migration would eventually converge in this vast region. What happened when these different populations encountered each other represents one of the most complex and fascinating chapters in human history, a story of cultural exchange, technological transfer, conflict, and ultimately, the emergence of new hybrid populations that combine the best innovations from multiple traditions. The first great convergence occurred when early coastal migrants who had followed the southern route from Africa encountered populations that had taken inland routes through the Middle East and Central Asia. These weren't just meetings between identical populations. Hundreds of thousands of years of separation had led to distinct cultural, technological, and possibly even biological differences between these groups. West Asian Iranian hunter-gatherers migrated to South Asia after the last glacial period, but before the onset of farming. Together with ancient South Asian hunter-gatherers, they formed the population of the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC. This migration brought new technologies, cultural practices, and genetic lineages that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of human development in the subcontinent. The archaeological evidence for these population encounters is complex and sometimes contradictory. In some regions, there's evidence of gradual cultural blending, with tool technologies and cultural practices from different traditions slowly merging over thousands of years. In other areas, the archaeological record suggests more rapid changes that might indicate population replacement or cultural dominance by one group over another. Genetic studies provide additional insights into these ancient population movements and interactions. Multiple researches indicate that the Austroasiatic populations in central India are derived from mostly male-dominated, Migrations from Southeast Asia during the Holocene. According to Van Dreen, 2007, the mitochondrial picture indicates that the Munda maternal lineage derives from the earliest human settlers on the subcontinent, whilst the predominant Y chromosome haplogroup argues for a Southeast Asian paternal homeland for Austroasiatic language communities in India. The complexity of these genetic patterns suggests that population interactions in ancient India were far more complex than simple conquest or replacement scenarios. Instead, the evidence points to centuries or millennia of interaction between different groups, with intermarriage, cultural exchange, and gradual population blending, creating the diverse populations that characterize the subcontinent today. Technological exchange during these convergence periods was particularly important for subsequent human development in India. Different migrant populations brought different technological traditions. Some specialized in particular types of stone tools. Others had advanced techniques for working with organic materials. And still others brought innovations in social organization or cultural practices. The meeting and merging of these traditions created technological synergies that accelerated innovation. Language families in India provide another window into these ancient population interactions. The presence of multiple unrelated language families across the subcontinent Indo-European, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, and Sino-Tibetan suggest that different waves of migration brought distinct linguistic traditions that have persisted despite millennia of contact and interaction. The timing of these convergences was influenced by climate change and environmental factors. Periods of environmental stress, such as ice ages or major climate transitions, often triggered large-scale population movements that brought different groups into contact. Conversely, periods of environmental stability allowed for more gradual cultural exchange and population blending. Archaeological evidence from sites across India shows how different cultural traditions influenced each other during convergence periods. Tool technologies that first appeared in one region gradually spread to others, but often with modifications that reflected local conditions or cultural preferences. This pattern of cultural diffusion and local adaptation created regional variations that persisted for thousands of years. The social dynamics of population convergence were undoubtedly complex and sometimes violent. Competition for resources, territorial disputes, and cultural conflicts were probably common when different groups encountered each other. However, the genetic evidence suggests that cooperation and intermarriage were also common, leading to the emergence of new hybrid populations that combined elements from multiple ancestral groups. Trade relationships often facilitated peaceful interaction between different populations, even when direct territorial overlap might have led to conflict. Archaeological evidence shows that valuable resources were exchanged across vast distances, suggesting that early Indian populations developed sophisticated diplomatic and commercial relationships that enabled peaceful coexistence and cultural exchange. The emergence of regional cultural complexes during later periods reflects the long-term consequences of these ancient convergences. Different regions of India developed distinctive cultural traditions that combined elements from multiple ancestral populations, creating the cultural diversity that characterizes the subcontinent today. According to Bryant, the Bactria Margiana material inventory of the Mehrgarh and Baluchistan burials is evidence of an archaeological intrusion into the subcontinent from Central Asia during the commonly accepted time frame for the arrival of the Indo-Aryans. This later migration represents another major convergence event that brought new cultural and technological traditions to populations that were already the product of earlier convergences. The genetic legacy of these convergences is visible in modern Indian populations. With the decline of the IVC and the migration of Indo-Europeans, the IVK people contributed to the formation of both the ancestral North Indians and Nile who were closer to contemporary West Eurasians. and the ancestral South Indians, Asi, who were descended predominantly from the southeastern Indian hunter-gatherers, known as Asai, who were distantly related to East Eurasians such as Aboriginal Australians, Andamanese, and also to East Asians, but also from West Eurasian hunter-gatherers from the Iranian plateau. The cultural innovations that emerged from these convergences laid the foundation for many of the achievements that would later characterize Indian civilization. Agricultural techniques, metallurgy, urban planning, and complex social organization all show evidence of combining innovations from multiple cultural traditions. The convergence of different populations in ancient India created a cultural laboratory where innovations could be tested, refined, and combined in new ways. The lessons from these ancient convergences remain relevant today. The Indian subcontinent's success in absorbing and integrating multiple waves of migration while maintaining cultural continuity demonstrates the possibilities for managing cultural diversity and population mobility in ways that enhance rather than diminish human potential. Chapter 9. Builders of the First Cities. The transformation from small hunting and gathering groups to the world's largest early urban civilization represents one of humanity's most remarkable achievements. And nowhere is this transformation more dramatic than in the Indian subcontinent. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, emerged from the cumulative innovations and population growth of hundreds of thousands of years of human development in the region. The foundations for urban civilization in India were laid by the gradual development of increasingly complex societies over tens of thousands of years. Sedentariness began in South Asia around 7000 BCE. By 4500 BCE, settled life had spread and gradually evolved into the Indus Valley Civilization, one of three early cradles of civilization in the Old World, which flourished between 2500 BCE and 1900 BCE in present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. The transition to settled village life required fundamental changes in technology, social organization, and environment management. Early village populations had to develop new techniques for food storage, waste management, construction of permanent structures, and coordination of community activities. These innovations laid the groundwork for the more complex urban developments that would follow. Agricultural intensification was crucial for supporting the larger populations that characterized early villages and later cities. The development of irrigation systems, selective breeding of crops and animals, and sophisticated farming techniques enabled populations to produce food surpluses that could support craft specialists, traders, and other non-agricultural occupations. The Indus Valley Civilization represents the culmination of this long process of social and technological development. At its peak, this civilization included over 1,000 settlements set across an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. The major cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro housed populations of 40,000 to 50,000 people, making them among the largest cities in the world at that time. The urban planning achievements of the Indus Valley Civilization were extraordinary for their time and remain impressive by modern standards. Cities were laid out according to sophisticated grid patterns with wide main streets, covered drainage systems, public baths, and standardized brick sizes. The level of planning and coordination required for such urban development indicates highly sophisticated governmental and administrative systems. The technological innovations of the Indus Valley Civilization encompassed virtually every aspect of human activity. Harappan craftsmen developed advanced techniques for working with bronze, creating standardized weights and measures, manufacturing pottery on an industrial scale, and producing textiles that were traded across the ancient world. The quality and standardization of Harappan products indicate sophisticated manufacturing systems and quality control procedures. Trade networks established by the Indus Valley civilization extended from Central Asia to southern India, and from Afghanistan to Gujarat. Archaeological evidence shows that Harappan goods reached Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and other distant regions, while exotic materials from these areas were imported to Indus cities. The scale and sophistication of these trade networks required advanced organizational capabilities and probably sophisticated financial systems. The social organization of Indus Valley cities appears to have been remarkably egalitarian compared to other early civilizations. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, there's little evidence of extreme wealth inequality, monumental architecture glorifying rulers, or elaborate royal burials. This suggests that Harappan society may have developed alternative forms of social organization that were more cooperative and less hierarchical than other early civilizations. The undeciphered Harappan script represents one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The script appears on thousands of seals, pottery fragments, and other objects, suggesting a literate civilization with sophisticated record-keeping systems. The inability to read this script limits our understanding of Harappan society, but the widespread use of writing indicates a complex administrative system. Water management systems in Indus Valley cities were far more advanced than those found in other early civilizations. Sophisticated drainage systems, public wells, private bathrooms, and possibly even flush toilets demonstrate remarkable understanding of hydraulic engineering and public health. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro represents one of the world's earliest examples of monumental water management architecture. The standardization evident throughout the Indus Valley civilization is extraordinary. Bricks were made to standard proportions across the entire civilization. Weights and measures were uniform from city to city, and even pottery styles showed remarkable consistency across vast distances. This standardization required sophisticated communication systems and probably centralized authority, or at least shared cultural standards. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BCE marks another crucial transition in Indian prehistory. Early in the second millennium BCE, persistent drought caused the population of the Indus Valley to scatter from large urban centers to villages. The causes of this decline are still debated, but climate change, natural disasters, and possibly invasion or internal conflict all may have played roles. The legacy of the Indus Valley civilization influenced subsequent developments in the Indian subcontinent for thousands of years. Many Harappan technological innovations continued to be used by later populations. Urban planning concepts influenced later city development, and cultural practices established during the Harappan period persisted in various forms throughout Indian history. Archaeological evidence suggests that the transition from the Indus Valley civilization to later cultural developments wasn't a complete break, but rather a gradual transformation. It is evident that a major geographic population shift accompanied this second millennium BCE localization process. This shift by Harappan and perhaps other Indus Valley cultural mosaic groups is the only archaeologically documented west-to-east movement of human populations in the Indian subcontinent before the first half of the first millennium BC. Urban planning principles developed during the Harappan period influenced city development throughout South Asian history. Concepts such as grid-patterned street layouts, covered drainage systems, and planned residential districts appear in later Indian cities, suggesting continuity of urban planning traditions across millennia. The economic systems developed by the Indus Valley civilization established patterns of craft specialization, long-distance trade, and resource management that continued to characterize Indian economic development for thousands of years. The emphasis on standardization, quality control, and market integration evident in Harappan society became enduring features of Indian commercial culture. Chapter 10. The Eternal Migrations. The Story of human migration to the Indian subcontinent didn't end with the first coastal populations, or even with the rise and fall of the Indus Valley civilization. Instead, the subcontinent continued to serve as a destination and transit zone for wave after wave of human migration, each bringing new technologies, cultures, and genetic lineages that added to the extraordinary diversity that characterizes the region. Today, between the second urbanization of late Iron Age, early historic, and medieval period, Indian subcontinent experienced repeated invasion, human migration of Central Asian warriors from Greco-Bactrian conquest till Sultanate Mughals of 16th century. These later migrations were often driven by climate change, political instability in Central Asia, and the magnetic pull of India's agricultural wealth and commercial opportunities. The Indo-Aryan migrations represent one of the most significant and controversial chapters in Indian prehistory. In the second millennium BCE, people from the Sintashta culture migrated through Bactria-Margiana culture and into the northern Indian subcontinent, modern-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. These migrations brought new languages, cultural practices, and possibly new technologies that would fundamentally influence subsequent Indian development. The complexity of these migrations is revealed by both archaeological and genetic evidence. According to Parpala, Indo-Aryan clans migrated into South Asia in subsequent waves. This explains the diversity of views found in the Rig Veda, and may also explain the existence of various Indo-Aryan cultural complexes in the later Vedic period, namely the Vedic culture centered on the Kuru kingdom in the heartland of Aryavarta in the western Ganges plain, and the cultural complex of Greater Magadha at the eastern Ganges plain, which gave rise to Jainism and Buddhism. The genetic impact of these various migrations is visible in modern Indian populations. These two ancestral populations, Asi and Ani, mixed extensively between 1,900 to 4,200 years ago, after the fall of the IVC and their respective southward migration, and affected both modern Indo-European populations as well as the Dravidian populations in the subcontinent, while the migrations of the Munda people and the Sino-Tibetan-speaking people from East Asia also added new elements. What makes the Indian migration story unique is the subcontinent's capacity to absorb and integrate diverse populations while maintaining cultural continuity. Unlike other regions where successive migrations often led to the replacement of earlier populations, India developed mechanisms for incorporating newcomers into existing social and cultural frameworks while allowing them to maintain distinct identities. The monsoon climate patterns that dominate much of India influence the timing and success of various migrations. Climate, human settlement, and migration in South Asia from early historic to medieval period. Evidence from new archaeological excavation at Vadnagar, Western India. Archaeological isotope data shows rise-fall of cultures linked to monsoon change. Successful migrations often coincided with favorable climate periods, while climate deterioration in Central Asia and other source regions often triggered new waves of migration to India. The geographical features of the Indian subcontinent created natural corridors and barriers that channeled migration flows in predictable directions. The mountain passes of the northwest, the coastal plains of the west and east, and the river valleys of the north all served as migration routes that connected India with Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and the broader Indian Ocean region. Trade networks often preceded and facilitated later migrations. Commercial connections established by earlier populations created pathways for cultural exchange and population movement that later migrants could follow. These networks also provided information about distant regions that may have encouraged migration and settlement. The cultural assimilation mechanisms that developed in India were remarkably sophisticated and flexible. Rather than requiring complete cultural conversion, Indian societies developed systems that allowed immigrant populations to maintain their distinct traditions while gradually adopting local practices and integrating into broader social networks. This flexibility enabled India to benefit from the innovations and perspectives brought by successive waves of immigrants. Language families in modern India reflect this complex migration history. Multiple researches indicate that the Austroasiatic populations in central India are derived from mostly male-dominated migrations from Southeast Asia during the Holocene. The presence of multiple language families, Indo-European, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, and Sino-Tibetan, demonstrates that different migration waves brought distinct linguistic traditions that have persisted despite millennia of contact and interaction. The technological impact of successive migrations was cumulative, with each wave bringing new innovations that were added to existing knowledge bases. Metallurgy, agricultural techniques, craft technologies, and architectural styles all show evidence of multiple influences that were integrated into distinctly Indian traditions. Urban development in post-Harappan India shows clear evidence of influence from multiple migration traditions. Archaeological evidence from sites like Vatnagar shows how successive populations built upon earlier foundations while adding their own innovations. Deep excavation of the archaeological site at Vatnagar, Western India, Gujarat state, reveals evidence of exceptionally well-preserved human settlement over the last 3 millennia. The social institutions that emerged in India to manage cultural diversity may represent some of humanity's earliest experiments in multiculturalism. The caste system, whatever its later rigidities and inequities, may have originally served as a mechanism for incorporating diverse populations into a single social framework while allowing them to maintain distinct occupational and cultural traditions, religious and philosophical. Developments in India often reflect the synthesis of ideas brought by different migration waves. The complex religious traditions that emerged in India show influences from indigenous practices, Central Asian spiritual traditions, and innovations that emerge from the interaction between different cultural groups. The economic systems that developed in India were specifically adapted to manage the diversity created by successive migrations. Trade guilds, market regulations, and commercial practices all show evidence of accommodating different cultural traditions while creating unified economic frameworks that enabled cooperation across cultural boundaries. The military and political innovations that emerged in India often reflected the need to manage relationships. The monsoon system that dominates Indian climate created a rhythm of environmental change that influenced human migration patterns for hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeological and isotope data shows rise-fall of cultures linked to monsoon change, revealing how shifts in precipitation patterns could trigger massive population movements across Central Asia and into the Indian subcontinent. When monsoons weakened in India but remained strong in Central Asia, populations moved south seeking better conditions. When the pattern reversed, migration flows changed direction. The medieval warm period, roughly 900 to 1300 CE, and the subsequent Little Ice Age, roughly 1300 to 1850 CE, demonstrate how relatively small climate changes could trigger major migration events. During the medieval warm period, improved conditions in Central Asia supported larger populations. But when climate deteriorated during the Little Ice Age, these populations were forced to seek new territories. The Indian subcontinent, with its relatively stable tropical and subtropical climates, became a refuge for climate migrants from colder northern regions. The complex relationship between El Niño Southern Oscillation (ENSO) events and Indian monsoons created unpredictable climate variations that required human populations to develop extraordinary adaptability. ENSO events could cause droughts that lasted for years or flooding that destroyed entire agricultural systems. Populations that survived these climate shocks developed resilient strategies that enabled them to cope with future environmental challenges. But they also created migration networks that could be activated when local conditions became unsustainable. Lake-level reconstructions and paleoclimate data from across South Asia reveal periods of rapid environmental change that coincided with major cultural transitions and population movements. The 4.2 kiloyear event, a period of severe drought around 2200 BCE, coincided with the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization and major population movements from western to eastern India. Similar climate migration correlations can be identified throughout Indian prehistory and history. Glacial cycles in the Himalayas created long-term environmental changes that influenced river systems, agricultural potential, and human settlement patterns across northern India. During glacial maxima, reduced river flows affected agricultural productivity in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, while glacial retreats could cause flooding and channel changes that forced populations to relocate. These glacial cycles operated on timescales of thousands of years, creating long-term migration pressures that shaped human settlement patterns across the subcontinent. Volcanic eruptions, both local and distant, created sudden environmental changes that triggered rapid migration events. The Toba supereruption 74,000 years ago was the most dramatic example, but smaller volcanic events continued to influence climate and migration patterns throughout human history in India. Volcanic ash from eruptions in Indonesia, the Mediterranean, and other distant regions could affect Indian climate for years, creating migration pressures that brought new populations to the subcontinent. Sea level changes associated with ice ages dramatically altered the geography of the Indian subcontinent, opening and closing migration routes and changing the availability of coastal resources. During glacial maxima, lower sea levels exposed land bridges and coastal plains that facilitated human movement, while interglacial periods raised sea levels and submerged coastal settlements, forcing populations to move inland. Desertification cycles in the Thar Desert and other arid regions of northwestern India created push and pull factors that influenced migration patterns for thousands of years. When arid regions became uninhabitable due to increasing dryness, populations moved toward more humid areas. When climate improvements made arid regions habitable again, populations expanded back into previously abandoned territories. The development of human climate prediction capabilities in ancient India enabled populations to anticipate and prepare for climate-driven migrations. Archaeological evidence suggests that some ancient Indian societies developed sophisticated understanding of climate cycles that allowed them to predict droughts, floods, and other environmental changes years in advance. This knowledge enabled planned migrations rather than desperate refugee movements. The genetic evidence for continuous migrations to India reveals an extraordinary tapestry of human lineages that interwove to create some of the most genetically diverse populations on Earth. Each migration wave brought distinct genetic signatures that can still be detected in modern Indian populations, allowing scientists to reconstruct ancient migration patterns and population interactions with unprecedented detail. Y chromosome haplogroup distributions across India reveal multiple waves of male-mediated migration that arrived at different times and through different routes. Haplogroup R1a, associated with Indo-European speakers, shows a gradient from northwest to southeast India that suggests migration from Central Asia. Haplogroup H, found primarily in India, represents ancient indigenous lineages that may have been present since the earliest human settlements. Haplogroup J2, associated with Iranian farmers, shows the genetic signature of Neolithic agricultural migrations. Mitochondrial DNA patterns tell a different but complementary story of ancient migrations. Haplogroup M, which dominates Indian populations, represents the genetic signature of the earliest human migrations to the subcontinent around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago. Haplogroup U represents later migrations from West Asia, while haplogroup N shows connections to East Asian populations. The complex patterns of mitochondrial DNA variation across India reveal multiple migration events and extensive gene flow between populations. Autosomal DNA analysis has revealed that modern Indian populations can be modeled as mixtures of three main ancestral components: ancient ancestral South Indians, AASI, related to indigenous hunter-gatherer populations; Iranian farmer-related ancestry, associated with Neolithic agricultural migrations; and steppe pastoralist ancestry, associated with Indo-European migrations. The proportions of these components vary across Indian populations, creating a genetic climb that reflects the complex history of population mixing. The identification of Denisovan ancestry in some Indian populations has provided evidence for interbreeding between modern humans and archaic human species in South Asia. While the Denisovan ancestry is low, less than 1%, its presence suggests that when modern humans first arrived in India, they encountered and interbred with existing archaic human populations. This genetic evidence supports archaeological suggestions that human evolution in India was more complex than simple replacement scenarios. Ancient DNA extracted from archaeological remains has begun to provide direct evidence for the genetic characteristics of ancient Indian populations. While the hot, humid climate of much of India is not conducive to DNA preservation, some sites have yielded genetic material that allows direct comparison between ancient and modern The discovery of population-specific genetic adaptations in Indian populations reveals how genetic variations enabled adaptation to local environmental conditions. Adaptations to malaria resistance, lactose tolerance, high-altitude living, and other environmental challenges show how genetic diversity, created by multiple migrations, provided raw material for natural selection to work on. The study of genetic recombination patterns has revealed that population mixing in ancient India was not random but followed specific patterns that may reflect social and cultural preferences. Some populations show evidence of preferential mating within linguistic or cultural groups, while others show more random mating patterns. These genetic signatures provide insights into ancient social structures and marriage patterns. The Indian subcontinent served as a vast cultural laboratory where traditions brought by successive migration waves were tested, refined, and combined to create new cultural innovations that often surpassed their individual components. This process of cultural synthesis and innovation continued for thousands of years, creating the rich cultural traditions that characterize the subcontinent today. Linguistic synthesis in ancient India created some of humanity's most sophisticated language systems. The interaction between Indo-European, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, and Sino-Tibetan language families created opportunities for borrowing, blending, and innovation that produced languages with extraordinary expressive capabilities. Sanskrit, which emerged from this multilingual environment, developed grammatical and vocabulary resources that enabled precise expression of complex philosophical, scientific, and literary concepts. Religious and philosophical synthesis created some of the world's most influential spiritual traditions. The interaction between indigenous animistic traditions, Iranian spiritual concepts, Indo-European religious practices, and innovations developed within India itself created religious systems that combined ritual complexity, philosophical sophistication, and practical wisdom. Buddhism, Jainism, and various Hindu traditions all emerged from this cultural synthesis. artistic traditions in India show clear evidence of synthesis between different cultural streams. Sculpture styles, architectural techniques, musical traditions, and decorative arts all show influences from multiple sources that were creatively combined to create distinctly Indian forms. The artistic achievements of classical Indian civilization represent the creative synthesis of innovations brought by different migration waves. Technological synthesis created innovations that often surpassed the individual technologies brought by different populations. Metallurgy, agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine all show evidence of combining techniques from different traditions to create new capabilities. The famous wood steel produced in India combined technologies from different sources to create metal that was superior to anything available elsewhere. Social organization systems developed in India show remarkable innovation in managing cultural diversity while maintaining social cohesion. The caste system, whatever its later rigidities, may have originally served as a mechanism for integrating diverse populations with different occupational specializations, cultural practices, and social traditions. This system enabled cooperation between groups while allowing them to maintain distinct identities. Educational systems that developed in ancient India created mechanisms for preserving and transmitting knowledge from multiple cultural traditions. The Gurukula system enabled specialized knowledge from different traditions to be preserved and passed down while also facilitating the synthesis of knowledge from different sources. These educational innovations created some of the world's earliest universities and centers of learning. Legal and administrative systems developed in India show evidence of combining legal traditions from different cultural backgrounds. The complex legal codes that emerged in classical India drew upon indigenous customs, Indo-European legal concepts, and innovations developed specifically for managing multicultural societies. These legal innovations created frameworks for governance that could accommodate diverse populations. Economic systems developed in India show remarkable sophistication in managing trade and exchange between different cultural groups. The development of standardized weights and measures, banking systems, and commercial law enabled trade networks that connected diverse populations while accommodating different cultural practices and preferences. Cultural transmission mechanisms developed in India created some of the world's most effective systems for preserving and spreading cultural innovations. The combination of oral traditions, written texts, artistic expression, and ritual practices created redundant systems for cultural preservation that could survive social disruptions and continue to transmit knowledge across generations. The migration routes that connected India with Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and the broader Eurasian world served as technological highways that facilitated the rapid spread of innovations across vast distances. These routes didn't just move people, they moved ideas, technologies, and cultural practices that transformed civilizations across multiple continents. The Silk Road, while famous for its role in medieval trade, had predecessors that operated for thousands of years before the classical period. Archaeological evidence shows that trade routes connecting India with Central Asia and China were operating during the Bronze Age and possibly earlier. These routes carried not just goods but also technologies, ideas, and people that facilitated continuous cultural exchange between India and other regions. Maritime trade routes across the Indian Ocean created even more extensive networks for technological transfer. The monsoon winds that made ocean navigation predictable also created regular opportunities for contact between India and Southeast Asia, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. These maritime networks facilitated the spread of Indian innovations to distant regions while bringing new technologies and ideas to India. The transfer of agricultural technologies through migration Networks had profound impacts on global food security. Crops domesticated in India, including rice, cotton, sugarcane, and numerous spices, spread through migration and trade networks to become fundamental components of agricultural systems worldwide. Similarly, crops from other regions were brought to India and adapted to local conditions. Metallurgical technologies developed in India spread through migration networks to influence metal production across Asia and beyond. Indian techniques for iron and steel production, copper working, and the creation of specialized alloys were carried by migrants and traders to regions where they were adapted and further developed. The famous Damascus steel may have been produced using techniques ultimately derived from Indian innovations. Mathematical and astronomical innovations developed in India spread through migration networks to influence scientific development across the ancient world. The decimal system, the concept of zero, trigonometric techniques, and astronomical calculation methods all spread from India to other regions, where they became foundational elements of local scientific traditions. Medical knowledge and pharmaceutical innovations developed in India spread through migration networks to influence healing traditions across Asia and beyond. Indian medical texts, surgical techniques, and pharmaceutical preparations were carried by migrants and traders to distant regions where they were integrated into local medical traditions. Textile technologies developed in India created some of the world's most sophisticated fabric production systems. Indian innovations in cotton processing, dyeing techniques, and weaving methods spread through trade networks. The continuous migrations to India created complex demographic dynamics that influenced social organization, economic development, and cultural change in ways that extended far beyond simple population growth. Understanding these demographic patterns provides insights into how large-scale population movements can create opportunities for social innovation and cultural development. Population density variations across the Indian subcontinent created different demographic pressures that influenced migration patterns and social organization. The fertile river valleys could support much higher population densities than arid or mountainous regions, creating population gradients that encouraged movement from less productive to more productive areas. These density gradients also created different social structures and cultural practices adapted to different demographic conditions. Age structure changes associated with migration waves created temporary demographic imbalances that had lasting social consequences. Young adult migrants often left behind aging populations in their origin regions, while creating age-heavy populations in their destination areas. These demographic imbalances required social innovations in elder care, child rearing, and labor organization that influenced social structures for generations. Gender ratios in migration streams created lasting demographic and social impacts. Male-dominated migrations, such as those suggested by genetic evidence for some Indo-European movements, created societies with unbalanced gender ratios that required social innovations in marriage systems, kinship structures, and gender roles. These demographic imbalances influenced social organization in ways that persisted long after gender ratios normalized. Occupational specialization associated with different migration waves created demographic concentrations of particular skills and knowledge systems. Migrants often brought specialized knowledge in agriculture, metallurgy, trade, or other activities that created occupational clusters in their settlement areas. These concentrations of expertise facilitated technological development and innovation, while also creating social hierarchies based on occupational specialization. Urban-rural population distributions were strongly influenced by migration patterns, with different waves of migrants showing different preferences for urban versus rural settlement. Some migrations led to the growth of existing cities, while others created new urban centers or contributed to rural population growth. These settlement preferences influenced economic development, social organization, and cultural change in lasting ways. Population mixing rates varied significantly across different regions and time periods, creating complex patterns of demographic integration. Some areas experienced rapid population mixing that created new hybrid populations within a few generations, while other areas maintained distinct population groups for centuries or millennia. These different mixing patterns created diverse social structures and cultural traditions across the subcontinent. Epidemic disease impacts associated with migration. Waves created demographic catastrophes that had lasting social consequences. When populations with different disease exposures came into contact, epidemic diseases could cause massive population declines that disrupted social structures and created opportunities for cultural change. These disease impacts influenced migration patterns and settlement choices for generations. Population recovery patterns after demographic disasters revealed the resilience mechanisms that enabled societies to rebuild and often emerge stronger than before. The ability to recover from population disasters required social institutions that could maintain cultural continuity while adapting to changed demographic conditions. These recovery mechanisms became important components of Indian social organization. Marriage and kinship systems developed in response to demographic conditions created by continuous migrations. The need to integrate newcomers while maintaining social cohesion led to innovations in marriage rules, kinship calculation, and family organization that enabled societies to absorb demographic change while maintaining stability. The continuous migrations to India created and sustained trade networks that became some of the most extensive and sophisticated commercial systems in the ancient world. These networks didn't just move goods, they moved people, ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. That transportation infrastructure developed to support trade networks created extensive systems of roads, ports, and way stations that facilitated commerce across vast distances. The development of this infrastructure required cooperation between different political authorities and cultural groups, creating frameworks for interregional cooperation that extended beyond commerce. Insurance and risk management systems developed to manage the hazards of long-distance trade created financial innovations that enabled merchants to undertake risky but potentially profitable ventures. The development of risk-sharing arrangements, insurance pools, and commercial partnerships enabled the expansion of trade networks while protecting individual merchants from catastrophic losses. Quality control and standardization systems developed to maintain commercial reputation across cultural boundaries created some of the world's earliest consumer protection mechanisms. The development of quality marks, guild regulations, and reputation systems enabled consumers to make informed choices while protecting producers from unfair competition. The challenge of governing societies created by continuous migrations led to remarkable innovations in political organization that created some of the world's most sophisticated governance systems. These innovations were tested in the laboratory of Indian diversity and often spread to influence political development across Asia and beyond. Federal systems that developed to manage relationships between different cultural groups created early models for governing diverse societies while maintaining unity. The development of systems that allowed local autonomy within larger political frameworks enabled diverse populations to maintain their cultural practices while participating in larger political and economic systems. Administrative systems that developed to govern multicultural societies created innovations in bureaucracy, record keeping, and policy implementation that enabled effective governance across cultural boundaries. The development of standardized administrative procedures, professional bureaucracies, and systematic record-keeping enabled large-scale political organization while accommodating cultural diversity. Legal pluralism systems that developed to accommodate different cultural traditions created frameworks for managing legal diversity within unified political systems. The development of systems that recognize different legal traditions while providing unified procedures for intergroup disputes enabled peaceful coexistence between populations with different cultural backgrounds. Diplomatic systems that developed to manage relationships between different political entities created sophisticated approaches to international relations that enabled cooperation while respecting sovereignty. The development of diplomatic protocols, treaty systems, and conflict resolution mechanisms enabled political cooperation across cultural boundaries. Military organization systems that developed to defend diverse societies created innovations in military recruitment, training, and deployment that took advantage of different cultural strengths while creating unified defense capabilities. The development of professional armies that included diverse populations while maintaining military effectiveness created models for military organization that influenced defense systems across Asia. Revenue systems that developed to finance governance of diverse societies created innovations in taxation, resource management, and public finance that enabled effective government while accommodating different economic systems. The development of tax systems that could operate across cultural boundaries while providing adequate revenue created models for public finance that influenced governance across the region. Justice systems that developed to maintain order in diverse societies created innovations in law enforcement, judicial procedure, and conflict resolution that enabled peaceful coexistence while maintaining social order. The development of court systems that could handle disputes between different cultural groups while maintaining legitimacy across cultural boundaries created models for judicial organization that influenced legal development across Asia. In conclusion, the continuous migrations to the Indian subcontinent created a vast laboratory for human innovation that produced solutions to some of the most challenging problems facing complex societies. The innovations developed to manage diversity, facilitate cooperation, and promote prosperity in this multicultural environment created models that continue to influence human development today. The legacy of these ancient migrations extends far beyond the subcontinent itself, providing tested approaches for addressing contemporary challenges of globalization, migration, and cultural diversity. Chapter 11. Legacy of the Ancient Paths. As our journey through the ancient migrations to the Indian subcontinent draws to a close, the profound impact of these early population movements on the modern world becomes clear. The people who first crossed the waters to reach India's shores, who survived volcanic catastrophes, who built the first cities, and who created the foundations of complex civilization, didn't just change India, they changed the trajectory of human development across the globe. The genetic legacy of early Indian populations is visible in modern populations far beyond the subcontinent itself. The southern route migrations that first brought humans to India also continued eastward to Southeast Asia, Australia, and eventually to the Pacific Islands. The genetic signatures of these early Indian populations can be traced in Aboriginal Australian, Melanesian, and other Pacific populations, demonstrating that India served as a crucial way station in humanity's expansion across the globe. The technological innovations pioneered in ancient India spread far beyond the subcontinent's borders through trade networks, migration, and cultural exchange. The sophisticated metallurgy, urban planning techniques, mathematical concepts, and agricultural innovations developed in India influenced civilizations from Central Asia to Southeast Asia and beyond. Many technologies that we consider fundamental to human civilization had their earliest or most sophisticated early development in the Indian subcontinent. The agricultural legacy of ancient India is particularly significant for global food security. Crops domesticated in India, including rice, cotton, and numerous spices, became crucial components of agricultural systems worldwide. The farming techniques, irrigation methods, and crop management practices developed by early Indian populations provided models that were adapted and adopted across Asia and beyond. Modern genetic studies continue to reveal new insights into the ancient migration patterns that shaped Indian populations. The largest study of the genomes of South Asian people has revealed extraordinary insights into genetic variation in India. These studies show that India's role as a meeting point for different human populations created genetic diversity that rivals that found in Africa, making India crucial for understanding human evolution and population history. The urban planning principles first developed in the Indus Valley civilization continue to influence city development today. Concepts such as grid-patterned street layouts, sophisticated drainage systems, and planned residential districts that first appeared in Harappan cities can be seen in modern urban planning across the world. The emphasis on public health infrastructure and standardized construction that characterized Harappan cities established principles that remain relevant for contemporary urban development. The cultural and philosophical traditions that emerged from the interaction of multiple migration waves in ancient India have had profound global impact. Buddhist and Hindu philosophical concepts spread across Asia and have increasingly influenced global thought. The emphasis on nonviolence, spiritual development, and ethical living that emerged from ancient Indian traditions continues to provide alternative frameworks for addressing contemporary global challenges. The linguistic legacy of ancient Indian migrations is visible in language families that span continents. The Indo-European language family, which includes most European languages as well as many languages of Central and South Asia, may have had crucial developments in the Indian subcontinent. The spread of these languages accompanied population movements and cultural exchanges that connected vast regions of Eurasia. The mathematical and astronomical achievements of ancient India built upon foundations laid by the earliest populations and continue to influence modern science and technology. Concepts such as the decimal system, the concept of zero, and sophisticated astronomical calculations that emerged from ancient Indian traditions became fundamental components of global mathematical and scientific knowledge. The trade networks that connected ancient India with the rest of the world established patterns of global commerce that persist today. The Indian Ocean trade routes, the land routes connecting India with Central Asia and China, and the commercial practices developed by ancient Indian merchants created templates for international trade that influenced economic development worldwide. The artistic and architectural traditions that emerged from ancient Indian migrations created aesthetic principles and construction techniques that spread across Asia and beyond. Temple architecture, sculpture styles, and decorative arts developed in India influenced artistic development from Southeast Asia to Central Asia and continue to inspire contemporary artists and architects. The social innovations developed to manage cultural diversity in ancient India provide models for addressing contemporary challenges of multiculturalism and social integration. The mechanisms developed for incorporating diverse populations while maintaining social cohesion offer insights for modern societies dealing with migration, cultural diversity, and social integration. Climate adaptation strategies developed by ancient Indian populations remain relevant for addressing contemporary climate change challenges. The techniques developed for managing monsoon variations, coping with flooding and drought, and maintaining agricultural productivity under variable climate conditions provide models for climate adaptation that are increasingly important as global climate patterns become more unstable. The resilience demonstrated by ancient Indian populations in surviving and thriving through multiple challenges: volcanic catastrophes, climate changes, social upheavals, and cultural transformations, offers inspiration and practical guidance for addressing contemporary global challenges. The adaptability, innovation, and persistence that characterize these ancient populations provide models for human resilience that remain relevant today. Archaeological research in India continues to reveal new insights into early human development that reshape our understanding of human capabilities and achievements. Recent discoveries have consistently demonstrated that early human populations were more sophisticated, more adaptable, and more innovative than previously thought. These discoveries force us to reconsider our assumptions about primitive peoples and recognize the remarkable achievements of our ancient ancestors. The conservation of archaeological sites and cultural heritage in India is crucial not just for Indian history, but for understanding global human development. The archaeological record of ancient migrations and cultural development in India provides irreplaceable insights into human evolution, technological development, and social innovation that are relevant for understanding human potential and addressing contemporary challenges. The story of early human migrations to India demonstrates that human success has always depended on adaptability, innovation, and cooperation across cultural boundaries. The people who first reached the most profound revelations about ancient Indian migrations have come through the revolutionary field of population genetics, which has transformed our understanding of human movement and mixing in ways that archaeology alone could never achieve. The genetic legacy encoded in the DNA of modern Indian populations tells a story far more complex and fascinating than any single archaeological site could reveal. Recent comprehensive genetic studies have shown that India contains the second highest genetic diversity of any region on Earth, trailing only Africa itself. This extraordinary diversity isn't accidental. It's the direct result of India's unique position as a crossroads where multiple waves of human migration converged, mixed, and created new population combinations that had never existed before in human history. Landmark study involving 2,762 high-coverage genomes from across India has revealed that most of the genetic variation within current Indian populations stems from a single major migration event around 50,000 years ago, but this was followed by numerous smaller migrations that added layer upon layer of genetic complexity. Each wave brought distinct genetic signatures that can still be detected today, allowing scientists to reconstruct ancient migration patterns with unprecedented precision. What makes the Indian genetic story particularly remarkable is the evidence for continuous gene flow between populations over tens of thousands of years. Unlike other regions where populations might have remained isolated for long periods, India's geography and culture seem to have facilitated ongoing genetic exchange that created a continental-scale laboratory for human genetic evolution. The ancestral North Indian, ANI, and ancestral South Indian, ASI genetic components identified in modern populations represent the genetic legacy of ancient population convergences that occurred thousands of years ago. These ancestral populations mixed extensively between 1,900 to 4,200 years ago, creating the genetic foundation for modern Indian diversity. But this mixing wasn't a one-time event, it was an ongoing process that continued for millennia. The preservation of ancient genetic lineages in Indian populations has provided crucial insights into early human evolution worldwide. Some genetic variants found in India represent some of the oldest human genetic lineages outside of Africa, providing windows into the early stages of human evolution that have been lost in other populations. These ancient lineages are living fossils that carry information about human capabilities and adaptations that developed hundreds of thousands of years ago. The genetic evidence for survival through the Toba supereruption has been particularly important for understanding human resilience and population bottlenecks. Analysis of genetic diversity patterns suggests that while the Toba eruption may have caused significant population reductions, it didn't create the severe bottleneck that some theories predicted. This genetic evidence supports the archaeological findings that humans not only survived Toba but maintained cultural continuity through the catastrophe. The complex patterns of genetic admixture found in Indian populations have provided models for understanding how human populations can maintain distinct identities while still exchanging genes and cultural innovations. The genetic evidence shows that ancient Indian populations developed sophisticated social mechanisms that allowed for limited gene flow between groups while maintaining overall population structure, a pattern that may have been crucial for both genetic health and cultural innovation. Modern medical genetics has benefited enormously from the study of Indian population genetics. The genetic diversity found in India includes variants that provide resistance to various diseases, enhanced adaptation to specific environmental conditions, and unique metabolic characteristics that have important implications for personalized medicine and drug development worldwide. The technological innovations pioneered by early Indian populations continue to influence modern engineering, manufacturing, and design in ways that are often unrecognized but fundamentally important. The principles underlying ancient Indian technologies have been rediscovered and applied to contemporary challenges, creating surprising connections between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge innovation. The urban planning principles first developed in the Indus Valley civilization have experienced a remarkable renaissance in contemporary sustainable urban design. The Harappan emphasis on grid pattern layouts, sophisticated drainage systems, and integration of residential and commercial areas has inspired modern urban planners working on sustainable city development. The water management systems of ancient Harappan cities, with their emphasis on public access to clean water and sophisticated waste management, provide models for addressing contemporary urban water challenges. Modern archaeological analysis using advanced technologies has revealed that Harappan construction techniques were far more sophisticated than previously recognized. The use of standardized brick sizes, precise measurements, and modular construction principles demonstrates engineering knowledge that predates similar developments in other civilizations by centuries. These principles are now being studied and applied in modern sustainable construction projects. The metallurgical innovations developed in ancient India laid foundations for techniques that remain important in modern material science. The famous Delhi iron pillar, which has resisted corrosion for over 1,600 years, was created using techniques that modern metallurgists are still working to fully understand and replicate. The principles underlying ancient Indian metallurgy are being studied for applications in developing new corrosion-resistant materials and sustainable manufacturing processes. The sophisticated understanding of material science demonstrated by ancient Indian toolmakers is being rediscovered through experimental archaeology and applied to modern tool design. The heat treatment techniques, composite tool construction, and precision manufacturing methods developed by ancient Indian craftsmen demonstrate engineering principles that remain relevant for modern manufacturing. The agricultural innovations pioneered in ancient India continue to influence modern sustainable farming practices. Crop rotation techniques, water management systems, and soil conservation methods developed thousands of years ago are being rediscovered and adapted for contemporary agricultural challenges. The genetic resources preserved in traditional Indian crop varieties are providing crucial material for developing climate-resilient crops for global food security. The astronomical and Mathematical achievements of ancient India built upon observational and computational techniques that were first developed by the earliest populations. The sophisticated understanding of mathematical relationships, astronomical cycles, and engineering calculations demonstrated in ancient Indian monuments and texts reflects knowledge traditions that can be traced back to the earliest human settlements in the subcontinent. The textile technologies developed in ancient India, including sophisticated dyeing techniques, fiber processing, the mathematical concepts pioneered in ancient India, including the decimal system, the concept of zero, and sophisticated geometric and algebraic techniques, became foundational elements of global mathematical knowledge. These innovations didn't just influence other civilizations, they became essential components of human mathematical capability that enabled everything from modern engineering to computer science. The astronomical observations and calculations developed in ancient India contributed to global understanding of celestial mechanics and calendar systems. The sophisticated understanding of planetary movements, eclipse prediction, and seasonal cycles developed by ancient Indian astronomers influenced astronomical development across Asia and beyond. The linguistic innovations that emerged from the interaction of multiple language families in ancient India have had lasting impacts on global language development. The grammatical analysis techniques developed by ancient Indian linguists, particularly the work of Panini, established principles for linguistic analysis that continue to influence modern linguistics and language study. The artistic and architectural principles developed in ancient India have continued to influence aesthetic development worldwide. The proportional systems, decorative techniques, and architectural innovations pioneered in ancient Indian art and architecture have been adapted and incorporated into artistic traditions across Asia and beyond. The medical knowledge developed in ancient India, building upon observations of human health and disease that began with the earliest populations, established principles of holistic healthcare that continue to influence medical practice worldwide. Traditional Indian medicine, with its emphasis on prevention, individualized treatment, and understanding of mind-body connections, increasingly influences modern integrative medicine. The influence of ancient Indian migrations extends far beyond the subcontinent itself through the movement of Indian populations to other regions and the genetic and cultural legacies they established across the globe. These migration patterns, which began in prehistoric times and continue today, have created a global network of Indian influence that spans continents. The early eastward migrations from India played crucial roles in the peopling of Southeast Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. Genetic evidence shows that populations carrying Indian genetic signatures were among the first to reach Australia over 50,000 years ago, establishing genetic lineages that remain visible in Aboriginal Australian populations today. These early migrants carried with them not just genes, but also technologies and cultural practices that influenced human development across the entire Indo-Pacific region. The maritime technologies developed by early Indian populations enabled some of humanity's most ambitious ocean voyages. The sophisticated understanding of navigation, boat construction, and ocean conditions that allowed early Indians to cross the Arabian Sea also enabled later voyages to Southeast Asia and beyond. These maritime capabilities established India as one of the earliest centers of ocean-going navigation technology. The trade networks established by ancient Indian populations created pathways for cultural and genetic exchange that operated for thousands of years. The monsoon trading systems of the Indian Ocean, the overland routes connecting India with Central Asia and China, and the coastal trading networks linking India with Southeast Asia all facilitated population movement and cultural exchange on a massive scale. The spread of Indian cultural and religious traditions through trade and migration has had profound impacts on global civilization. Buddhism, which emerged from the cultural synthesis created by multiple migration waves in ancient India, spread across Asia and influenced philosophical development from Sri Lanka to Japan. Hindu cultural traditions similarly spread throughout Southeast Asia, creating lasting cultural influences that remain visible today. The genetic legacy of Indian migrations is visible in populations across the Indian Ocean region. From Madagascar to Indonesia, from Central Asia to Southeast Asia, genetic signatures traceable to ancient Indian populations demonstrate the extent of population movement and mixing that characterized the ancient world. These genetic connections created a vast network of related populations that facilitated continued cultural and technological exchange. The agricultural knowledge developed in ancient India spread through migration and trade to influence farming practices across Asia and beyond. Crops domesticated in India, irrigation techniques, and farming practices were carried by migrants and traders to new regions where they were adapted to local conditions and became foundational elements of regional agricultural systems. The linguistic influence of ancient Indian migrations is visible in language families that extend across vast regions of Asia. Indo-European languages, which may have had crucial developments in the Indian subcontinent, spread across Europe and Asia through migration and cultural contact. Other Indian language influences can be traced in Southeast Asian and Central Asian language families. Perhaps the most important legacy of ancient Indian migrations is the demonstration of human resilience and adaptability in the face of extreme challenges. The survival strategies developed by early Indian populations provide models for addressing contemporary global challenges that threaten human survival and prosperity. The climate adaptation strategies developed by ancient Indian populations are increasingly relevant as global climate change creates new challenges for human societies. The techniques developed for managing monsoon variations, coping with extreme weather events, and maintaining agricultural productivity under variable climate conditions provide tested approaches for climate adaptation that have proven effective over thousands of years. The disaster preparedness and recovery systems that enabled ancient Indian populations to survive catastrophic events, like the Toba supereruption, offer insights for modern disaster management. The social organization, resource management, and technological preparation that enabled survival through years-long environmental catastrophes demonstrate capabilities that remain relevant for contemporary disaster planning. The social innovation systems that enabled ancient Indian populations to integrate diverse cultures while maintaining social cohesion provide models for managing cultural diversity in increasingly globalized societies. The mechanisms developed for incorporating newcomers, managing cultural differences, and creating inclusive social institutions offer tested approaches for addressing contemporary challenges of migration and cultural integration. Technological innovation systems that enabled continuous adaptation and improvement in ancient Indian societies provide models for promoting innovation and technological development in contemporary contexts. The social structures that encouraged experimentation, rewarded successful innovations, and facilitated technology transfer between groups demonstrate principles that remain relevant for modern innovation management. The resource management strategies developed by ancient Indian populations provide models for sustainable development that balance human needs with environmental conservation. The agricultural techniques, water management systems, recent excavations at sites across India have revealed evidence of far more sophisticated early human settlements than previously recognized. Multi-level excavations at sites like Vadnagar have shown continuous human occupation spanning thousands of years, with each layer revealing new evidence of technological innovation, cultural development, and environmental adaptation. The application of new archaeological techniques, including advanced dating methods, environmental reconstruction techniques, and artifact analysis technologies, has revealed previously unrecognized complexity in ancient insights. What were once thought to be simple hunter-gatherer camps are now recognized as sophisticated settlements with evidence of specialized activities, long-distance trade, and complex social organization. The discovery of new human fossil material, while still rare, continues to provide crucial insights into human evolution in India. Each new fossil find helps fill gaps in our understanding of human development and provides evidence for the remarkable diversity of early human populations in the subcontinent. The identification of previously unknown archaeological sites through satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and other remote sensing technologies is revealing the true scale of ancient human occupation in India. Hundreds of new sites are being identified and investigated, dramatically expanding our understanding of ancient population, densities, and settlement patterns. Underwater, archaeology in the Indian Ocean is beginning to reveal evidence of early coastal settlements that were submerged by rising sea levels after the last ice age. These submerged sites may contain crucial evidence about the earliest human settlements in India and the maritime technologies that enabled early ocean crossings. The application of environmental archaeology techniques is revealing detailed information about ancient climates, ecosystems, and environmental changes that influenced human development in India. This environmental evidence is providing new insights into how early humans adapted to changing conditions and managed environmental challenges. International collaborative research projects are bringing together archaeologists, geneticists, climate scientists, and other specialists to create more comprehensive understanding of ancient Indian human development. These interdisciplinary approaches are revealing connections and patterns that couldn't be detected through any single research method. Looking toward the future, the legacy of ancient Indian migrations continues to influence human development in ways that are only beginning to be recognized and understood. The principles, technologies, and social innovations developed by early Indian populations provide tested approaches for addressing contemporary challenges and creating sustainable human futures. The urban planning principles pioneered in ancient India are being applied to create more sustainable and livable cities. The emphasis on water management, waste disposal, standardized construction, and integration of residential and commercial areas that characterized ancient Indian cities provides models for addressing contemporary urban challenges. The agricultural innovations developed in ancient India are being rediscovered and adapted for modern sustainable farming. Traditional crop varieties, farming techniques, and land management practices are providing genetic resources and practical approaches for developing climate-resilient agricultural systems. The social innovation systems that enabled ancient Indian societies to manage diversity and promote cooperation are providing models for addressing contemporary challenges of globalization, migration, and cultural integration. The tested approaches for creating inclusive societies while maintaining cultural distinctiveness offer insights for building peaceful and prosperous global communities. The technological innovation traditions that characterized ancient Indian development are inspiring new approaches to research and development that emphasize sustainability, local adaptation, and social benefit. The principles underlying ancient Indian technology are being applied to develop appropriate technologies for contemporary challenges. The resilient strategies that enabled ancient Indian populations